I never expected to come home early that day. The quarterly review meeting wrapped up ahead of schedule, and I thought I'd surprise Sarah with lunch. After 5 years of marriage, I still enjoyed those little spontaneous moments. We'd been high school sweethearts who reconnected at our 10-year reunion, and every day since felt like a gift, a second chance at what should have been. The late September rain had just started as I pulled into our driveway. I noticed an unfamiliar car parked across the street but thought nothing of it. Probably belonged to one of the neighbor's visitors. I had picked up Sarah's favorite pasta from that little Italian place she loved, the one we discovered on our first anniversary. The white paper bag was dotted with raindrops as I juggled it, along with my laptop case and keys. Our house was quiet when I entered, which was odd. Sarah usually had music playing when she worked from home. She'd been doing that more frequently since her promotion 6 months ago. The promotion that came shortly after Daniel joined our department. Sarah? I called out, setting the food on the kitchen counter. No response. I loosened my tie and headed upstairs, thinking maybe she was on a work call with headphones on. The bedroom door was slightly ajar, and I heard her laugh, that special, throaty laugh I loved. But something about it sent a chill through me. It wasn't her normal laugh. It was intimate, private. The next few seconds played out in slow motion, my hand pushing the door open wider. The bed coming into view. Sarah's naked back, the man's hands on her waist, their startled expressions turning toward me. His face, Daniel's face, flushed and horrified. My coworker, my team member, the guy I had personally mentored for the past year. James, Sarah gasped, clutching the sheet to her chest, her face draining of color. You're supposed to be at the quarterly review. I stood there, the world tilting beneath my feet, my stomach twisted violently. The pasta in the kitchen, the rain outside, the wedding photo of us on the dresser, Sarah's smile beaming at me as I held her in my arms. James, I can explain. Daniel started, reaching for his shirt on the floor. Don't. The word came out as barely a whisper, my throat constricting around it. I turned and walked out, each step requiring enormous concentration. Down the stairs, through the hall, past the kitchen with its forgotten lunch. The rain had intensified, but I didn't feel it soaking through my shirt as I got into my car and just sat there, staring at our front door. How long had it been happening? Weeks? Months? My mind raced through every late night at the office, every business trip, every time Sarah had mentioned Daniel's name casually over dinner. Had I been completely blind? My phone vibrated in my pocket. Sarah. I silenced it and started the car. I couldn't go back to the office. Couldn't face anyone. I drove aimlessly through town, past the park where we used to have Sunday picnics, past the movie theater where we had our first date after reconnecting. Everything looked different now, as if someone had altered the colors of the world while I wasn't paying attention. I ended up at a hotel 20 miles outside the city. My hands shook as I checked in, the receptionist's sympathetic glance telling me I looked exactly how I felt. Destroyed. Once inside the sterile room, I finally let the tears come, hot and angry, soaking the cheap polyester bedspread. My phone kept vibrating. Sarah. Daniel. Even my boss probably wondering where I disappeared to after the meeting. I turned it off completely and lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling. That night, as I tossed and turned in the unfamiliar bed, my sadness began to harden into something else. Something cold and clear and determined. I had given Sarah everything. My trust, my love, my vulnerability. I had mentored Daniel, shared credit with him on projects, invited him to our home for dinner. By morning, I knew I wouldn't just walk away quietly. They had taken my dignity, but I wouldn't let them take anything else. As the first light filtered through the cheap hotel curtains, I began to plan. I stayed at that hotel for 3 days. Sarah called incessantly at first, then started texting. Please come home so we can talk. It wasn't what you think. James, I love you. It was a terrible mistake. On the second day, Daniel tried calling too. I blocked his number immediately. My boss, Margaret, left increasingly concerned voicemails about my unexplained absence. I finally sent her a brief email claiming a family emergency, requesting a week of personal leave. She granted it without question. I had never taken personal time in the 5 years I'd worked at Amdex Solutions. On the fourth day, I rented a small furnished apartment across town with a month-to-month lease. I needed space to think, to plan, to rebuild myself. The place was soulless. Beige walls, generic furniture, the faint smell of previous tenants cooking. But it wasn't the home I'd shared with Sarah, and that was all that mattered. I finally turned my phone back on and called my old college roommate, Ben, who had become a divorce attorney. Jesus, James, I'm so sorry, he said after I explained the situation, his voice heavy with genuine concern. What can I do? I need advice. And discretion. You have both. Do you want to file immediately or? Not yet, I said, staring out the window at the unfamiliar street below. I need to understand my options first. Ben walked me through the legal process, explaining how marital assets would likely be divided, what documentation I should gather, and the importance of not making any major financial decisions in the heat of emotion. And James, he added cautiously, I have to advise against anything vindictive. Courts don't look kindly on revenge scenarios. I assured him I understood, thanked him, and hung up. Then I opened my laptop and began my research. Amdex Solutions, where both Daniel and I worked, was a mid-sized financial software company. I'd been with them since they were practically a startup, heading their cybersecurity division. We'd grown exponentially in recent years, but I knew from internal meetings that our CEO was looking for an exit strategy. Gerald Amdex was approaching retirement age and had been discreetly putting out feelers about potential buyers. I had substantial savings in a trust fund from my grandparents that I'd never touched. Not enough to buy Amdex outright, but perhaps enough to become a significant player in its future. I began researching investment groups, private equity firms, and potential partners who might be interested in a tech acquisition. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming control. A week after discovering Sarah's betrayal, I returned to the office. I had lost weight, my clothes hanging slightly looser on my frame, and dark circles shadowed my eyes despite my efforts to appear composed. The news had clearly spread. Conversations halted as I walked through the office. Sympathetic glances followed me to my desk. Margaret met me at my office door, her usually stern face softened with concern. James, come in and close the door, she said. How are you holding up? I'm managing, I replied, sitting across from her. Thank you for the time off. Of course. She hesitated. I've reassigned Daniel to the Seattle project. He'll be working remotely for the foreseeable future. A small mercy. At least I wouldn't have to see him every day. And the quarterly projections? I asked, desperate to focus on work. All handled. You've built a good team. She studied me for a moment. James, if you need more time, Mom, what I need is to work. I interrupted more sharply than intended. I'm sorry. I need normalcy right now. She nodded, understanding in her eyes. All right, but my door's open if you need it. I threw myself into work with a ferocity that surprised even me. 12, 14 hours a day, arriving before dawn and leaving well after dark. My team was initially concerned, then impressed, then slightly alarmed as weeks passed with no change in my intensity. At night, in my sparse apartment, I continued my other project. I reached out to contacts in venture capital, former colleagues who had moved to investment banking, anyone who might help me piece together the resources needed for what I was planning. I studied Amdex financial reports, its client base, its market position, looking for leverage. Meanwhile, Sarah continued her attempts to contact me. She showed up at the office once, but security, instructed by Margaret, gently turned her away. She left letters at my parents' house, which they forwarded without comment, respecting my request not to discuss the situation. I read each one, looking for any information that might be useful, then filed them away in a folder marked divorce. In her letters, she claimed the affair with Daniel had been brief, only a few months, a terrible mistake born of loneliness during my long work hours. She begged for forgiveness, for a chance to explain in person, for marriage counseling. Each letter grew more desperate as I maintained my silence. In mid-November, nearly 2 months after discovering them together, I had my first significant breakthrough. Through a former client now working in private equity, I learned that a firm called Westbrook Partners was quietly exploring a tech acquisition in our sector. I arranged a meeting, initially presenting myself as merely a high-level employee with inside knowledge of Amdex's operations. The meeting took place in a private dining room at an upscale restaurant downtown. 3 Westbrook partners listened intently as I outlined Amdex's position in the market, its client relationships, and its potential for growth. All information that was technically public, but enhanced by my insider perspective. Why are you bringing this to us? Asked Catherine Westbrook, the firm's managing partner, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s. Loyalty to your employer doesn't typically involve shopping them to acquisition firms. I met her gaze steadily. I believe in the company's potential. I also believe the current leadership has taken it as far as they can. The right buyer could double its value within 3 years. And what would your role be in this scenario? This was the moment. I want to be part of the acquisition team. I have personal resources I'm prepared to invest, and I want a leadership position post-acquisition. Her eyebrow raised slightly. Personal resources? Most executives at your level don't have the kind of capital we're talking about. I have family money I've never accessed, and I'm highly motivated. The three partners exchanged glances. We'll need to see proof of funds, said the youngest partner, a man named Elliot. And this conversation would need to remain absolutely confidential. Of course, I nodded. I can provide verification within 48 hours. As I left the meeting, my heart raced with a strange mixture of anxiety and exhilaration. The plan was taking shape, becoming real. That night, I contacted my financial advisor and began the process of liquidating my trust fund, a decision that would have seemed unthinkable just months before. 2 days later, I provided Westbrook with proof of my financial capabilities. A week after that, we had a follow-up meeting where they presented a rough acquisition strategy. By early December, we had a tentative agreement. Westbrook would provide the majority of the capital, while I would contribute a significant personal investment and my insider knowledge. In return, I would become Chief Operating Officer of Amdex post-acquisition, with considerable authority over organizational structure and personnel decisions. It was happening. The trap was being set. Christmas approached, bringing with it a fresh wave of pain. Sarah and I had traditions, picking out a tree together, hosting a dinner for friends, exchanging one gift on Christmas Eve. This year I spent the holiday alone in my apartment, working on the acquisition details and avoiding calls from family members who wanted to make sure I wasn't alone. On Christmas Eve, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Sarah standing there, a small wrapped package in her hands, snowflakes melting in her auburn hair. She looked thinner, her eyes red-rimmed and shadowed. Please, she said before I could speak. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. Against my better judgment, I let her in. She stood awkwardly in the center of my sparse living room, taking in the absence of holiday decorations, the stack of work papers on the coffee table, the general sense of impermanence. You're really not coming back, are you? She asked quietly. No. She nodded as if confirming something she already knew. I filed the divorce papers. I'm not contesting anything. The house, the accounts, take whatever you want. This surprised me. In her letters, she had always held out hope for reconciliation. Why now? I asked. Because I love you, she said, her voice breaking slightly. And this limbo is destroying you. I can see it. She placed the package on the coffee table. This was meant to be your Christmas Eve gift. I bought it before everything fell apart. I thought you should have it anyway. After she left, I stared at the package for a long time before finally opening it. Inside was a first edition copy of The Count of Monte Cristo, my favorite book since childhood. The story of a man betrayed, who disappears and transforms himself, returning with elaborate plans for revenge against those who wronged him. The irony wasn't lost on me. I wondered if Sarah had made the connection, if this was her way of acknowledging what she suspected I might be planning. Or perhaps it was just a cruel coincidence. I placed the book on my bedside table and returned to my work. January brought the first real movement on the acquisition. Westbrook Partners made a preliminary approach to Gerald Amdex, who was receptive but cautious. The dance had begun. At the office, I maintained my facade of the dedicated employee, still working long hours but now with a different purpose. I needed to understand every aspect of the company's operations, every key relationship, every vulnerability that might be exploited during the transition. Daniel remained in Seattle, checking in for virtual meetings where we maintained cold professional courtesy. I could see the others on the team watching our interactions, waiting for some dramatic confrontation that never came. They didn't understand that I was playing a longer game. In mid-February, Gerald called an all-hands meeting to announce that Amdex was exploring a potential acquisition by Westbrook Partners. There was the expected anxiety among employees, questions about job security, speculation about changes. Gerald assured everyone that Westbrook valued our talent and had no plans for massive restructuring. I watched my colleagues' faces, noting who looked relieved, who looked worried, who began immediately updating their resumes. Knowledge was power, and I was gathering as much as I could. After the announcement, I was summoned to Gerald's office. Catherine Westbrook was there, along with 2 other executives from her firm. James, Gerald said warmly, Catherine tells me you've been instrumental in bringing this opportunity to their attention. I nodded modestly. I've always had Amdex's best interests at heart. Catherine has suggested you join the transition team, given your comprehensive understanding of our operations. I think it's an excellent idea. And just like that, I was officially part of the acquisition process. My plan was progressing exactly as I'd hoped. Over the next few weeks, I met regularly with the Westbrook team, providing insights into Amdex's internal structure, suggesting ways to streamline operations post-acquisition. I was careful to keep my recommendations strategic and business-focused, never letting personal vendettas show. In one of these meetings, Catherine pulled me aside afterward. "You're very good at this," she observed. "The way you balance current organizational needs with future vision. It's rare." "Thank you, but I can't help wondering what's really driving you," she continued, her gaze penetrating. "This level of investment, both financial and personal, suggests something beyond career ambition." I maintained eye contact, my expression neutral. "I believe in seizing opportunities when they present themselves." She smiled slightly. "Well, whatever your motivation, it's working for us. The board is impressed with the transition plan, particularly your recommendations for leadership restructuring." That night, I allowed myself a small celebration, a single glass of expensive scotch as I reviewed the latest acquisition documents. The deal was moving forward rapidly now, with closing expected by the end of March. Everything was falling into place. March arrived with unexpected complications. Sarah's father suffered a severe heart attack, and despite our separation, I felt compelled to send flowers to the hospital. It was a small gesture of human decency toward a man who had always treated me like a son. Sarah called to thank me, her voice thick with emotion. "It would mean a lot to him if you visited," she said. "He's asking for you." I went the next day, steeling myself for the awkwardness. Her father looked frail in the hospital bed, attached to monitors and IVs. Sarah was there, along with her mother and sister. They discreetly left us alone. "James," he said weakly, reaching for my hand. "Good of you to come." "Of course." "Hakunim." "How are you feeling?" He waved off the question. "Doctors say I'll recover. Not here to talk about my health." He fixed me with a direct gaze, surprisingly strong despite his condition. "Sarah told us everything." "What she did? Terrible mistake." I remained silent, uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "Known you since you were 23, he continued. "Watched you grow into a fine man. Whatever you decide about the marriage, you'll always be family to me." The simple statement hit me harder than I expected. I had lost not only my wife, but an entire extended family that I had grown to love. "Thank you," I managed to say. "That means a lot." As I left, Sarah walked me to the elevator. "He's going to be okay," she said. "The doctors are optimistic." "I'm glad." She hesitated, then asked, "Have you heard the rumors about Amdex? Someone said the company's being sold." "It's more than rumors," I replied. "Westbrook Partners is acquiring us. The deal should close by the end of the month." Her eyes widened slightly. "That's significant." "Will you stay on?" "Yes. In a new role, actually." "That's good," she said with what seemed like genuine relief. "You've always deserved more recognition there." As the elevator arrived, she touched my arm lightly. "James, I know it doesn't change anything, but Daniel and it's been over since the day you found us. It was never anything real." I stepped into the elevator, my face carefully neutral. "It doesn't change anything," I confirmed. But as I drove away from the hospital, I felt the first faint twinge of doubt about my plan. Not enough to abandon it, but enough to make me question the extent of what I intended to do. The acquisition moved forward at an accelerated pace. Due diligence was completed, contracts were drawn up, and a closing date was set for March 30th. Throughout the process, I maintained my dual role, trusted Amdex executive and Westbrook insider, with increasing confidence. A week before closing, Catherine called me into a private meeting at Westbrook's offices. "We need to discuss the post-acquisition org chart," she said, sliding a document across the table. I reviewed it carefully. As agreed, I was slated to become COO, reporting directly to the new CEO, a Westbrook executive named Michael Pearson. Most of the current leadership team would remain in place during the transition period, with evaluations to follow in the coming months. "This looks appropriate," I said, noting that both Sarah and Daniel's positions were maintained in the initial structure. "Perfect. There's one other matter," Catherine said. "The board has some concerns about potential conflicts of interest in your new role." My pulse quickened. "What kind of conflicts?" "We understand your wife works in the marketing department, and there's been some personal disruption between you. The board wants assurance that personnel decisions will be based solely on business criteria." So they knew. Of course they knew. A company like Westbrook would have done thorough background checks on all key players. My personal situation won't affect my professional judgment, I stated firmly. But I appreciate the concern. Perhaps those specific departments could report through a different executive to avoid any appearance of impropriety. Catherine seemed satisfied with this response. That's what we were thinking. I'll adjust the reporting structure accordingly. A small obstacle, easily navigated. The plan remained on track. The week before closing was a flurry of activity. Final contracts were signed, transition teams established, and an all-company meeting scheduled for the day after closing to introduce the new leadership. The night before the acquisition became official, I couldn't sleep. I stood at the window of my apartment, looking out at the city lights, thinking about how much had changed in the 7 months since I had walked in on Sarah and Daniel. The pain had transformed into something harder, more focused. I was no longer the man who had bought pasta for his wife on a rainy September afternoon. That man had died on his bedroom threshold. The new James was calculating, patient, and about to get everything he wanted. March 30th dawned clear and cold. I dressed with particular care. My best suit, a crisp white shirt, a power tie. Today would change everything. The official closing took place at Westbrook's offices, a sterile affair of signatures and handshakes. Gerald Amdex looked both relieved and slightly melancholy as he signed the final documents, transferring ownership of the company he had built from nothing. I felt a momentary pang of sympathy for him, quickly suppressed. "Take care of my people," he said to me quietly as we left the conference room. "I will," I promised, meaning it in my own way. The all-company meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. As employees filed into the large conference space, I observed their expressions: anxiety, curiosity, resignation. Sarah sat with the marketing team, her face pale but composed. Daniel had flown in from Seattle for the occasion and sat separate from her, his eyes occasionally darting in my direction. Catherine Westbrook opened the meeting, introducing herself and explaining Westbrook's vision for Amdex's future. She then introduced Michael Pearson as the new CEO, who spoke briefly about his background and enthusiasm for the company's potential. "And now," Michael said, "I'd like to introduce our new Chief Operating Officer, someone many of you already know and respect. James Preston has been instrumental in making this transition as smooth as possible and will continue to be a vital leader as we move forward." Murmurs rippled through the room as I took the podium. The promotion was clearly a surprise to most of my colleagues. I saw shock on Sarah's face and something like dawning comprehension on Daniel's. "Thank you, Michael," I began, my voice steady and confident. "As someone who has been with Amdex for 5 years, I understand what makes this company special. Its people, its innovation, its integrity." I paused, letting my gaze move across the audience. "The coming months will bring changes, but change creates opportunity. Some of you will find new roles that better utilize your talents. Others will have the chance to expand your current responsibilities. Each of you will be evaluated based on your contributions and your commitment to our new direction." My eyes met Daniel's briefly, then Sarah's. "I'm looking forward to working with each of you as we build Amdex's future together." The message was clear to those who needed to hear it. The power dynamic had shifted. Revenge would not be swift and dramatic, but methodical and absolute. After the meeting, colleagues crowded around to congratulate me. I accepted their good wishes with appropriate modesty, all the while aware of Sarah and Daniel hanging back at the edges of the room, their faces reflecting very different emotions. Her confusion, his fear. As the crowd thinned, Daniel approached cautiously. "Congratulations on the promotion," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "It's well-deserved." "Thank you, Daniel. How's Seattle treating you?" "It's fine. I've been wondering about my position moving forward. If I should continue there or return to headquarters." I smiled pleasantly. "We'll be reviewing all remote arrangements in the coming weeks. I'm sure we'll find the optimal placement for your skills." The uncertainty in his eyes was deeply satisfying. Sarah approached next, waiting until Daniel had walked away. "James, this is incredible news. COO, I'm so proud of you." "Are you?" I asked quietly. She flinched slightly at my tone. "Of course. No one deserves it more. It's interesting how things work out, isn't it?" "James," she said, lowering her voice, "I know what you must think, but please don't use this position to—" "I need to join the executive team," I interrupted smoothly. "We have a lot to discuss today." "Excuse me." I left her standing there, her sentence unfinished. She knew. She understood what was happening, what I had orchestrated. The realization in her eyes had been worth every moment of planning. That night, in my apartment, I opened the first edition Count of Monte Cristo she had given me for Christmas. Inside the front cover, she had written, To James, who taught me what true love means. Forever yours, Sarah. I closed the book and poured myself a glass of scotch. Phase 1 was complete. Now the real work would begin. The first month after the acquisition passed in a blur of meetings, reorganizations, and strategic planning, I approached my new role with a combination of genuine dedication and calculated maneuvering. Every decision served two purposes: advancing the company's interests and positioning me for what would come next. During this time, I maintained professional distance from both Sarah and Daniel. No overt actions, no obvious targeting, just the weight of uncertainty hanging over them, growing heavier with each passing week. In early May, Michael called me into his office to discuss the marketing department. The Westbrook board wants to see a more aggressive digital strategy, he said. They're not impressed with the current approach. This was the opportunity I'd been waiting for. I've had similar concerns, I replied. The department has been slow to adapt to changing consumer behaviors. Recommendations. I placed a folder on his desk. I've drafted a restructuring plan. We bring in a new director from outside with strong digital credentials, streamline the team, and reallocate resources to emerging channels. Michael reviewed the document, nodding appreciatively. This is thorough. What about the current leadership? Sarah Preston has good creative instincts but lacks technical expertise. I'd suggest moving her to a specialized role focusing on brand identity, reporting to the new director. I kept my tone purely professional, as if discussing someone I had no personal connection to. You're comfortable making that call, given your history? Michael asked carefully. I'm making the recommendation that best serves the company, I replied. Personal considerations aren't relevant. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. All right, begin the search for a new director. Once we have candidates, we'll discuss the reorganization timeline. Phase 2 was underway. Over the next 2 weeks, I worked with HR to identify potential candidates for the new marketing director position. Meanwhile, I arranged for a comprehensive audit of all remote work arrangements, allegedly to ensure consistency and productivity. Daniel contacted me twice during this period, each message increasingly anxious about his status. I responded with polite vagueness, neither reassuring nor threatening, letting his imagination do the work for me. Sarah approached me in the parking garage one evening as I was leaving the office. We need to talk, she said, stepping in front of my car. About? I kept my voice neutral. About what you're doing. This restructuring, the new director search. It's obvious, James. What's obvious is that our marketing strategy needs updating. The board agrees. This isn't about marketing strategy and you know it. Her voice trembled slightly. You're using your position to punish me. I regarded her coldly. That's a serious accusation. Do you have evidence that I'm making biased business decisions? James, because if not, I'd suggest focusing on your performance rather than inventing conspiracy theories. Unless you'd prefer to take your concerns to HR, I raised an eyebrow, though that might necessitate explaining the full context of your allegations. She stepped back, her face pale. You've changed. Yes, I agreed simply. I have. Good night, Sarah. As I drove away, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Satisfaction at her distress, but also a hollow ache at what we had become to each other. The man who had loved her was indeed gone, replaced by someone colder and more calculating. But in quiet moments like this, I sometimes caught glimpses of my former self, watching with horror at what I was becoming. I pushed the thought aside. There was no turning back now. By June, I had identified the perfect candidate for the new marketing director role. Caroline Vega, a rising star from a major tech company with impressive digital credentials and a reputation for no-nonsense leadership. After a series of interviews, Michael and the board approved her hiring with a start date in early July. The same week, I completed my audit of remote work arrangements. As expected, the results showed inconsistencies in productivity and collaboration. I prepared a detailed report recommending a standardized approach, with specific remote positions being eliminated in favor of centralized teams. Daniel's Seattle position was prominently featured in the Recommend Termination category, complete with productivity metrics and cost analyses justifying the decision. Everything was documented, rational, and utterly defensible. I presented the findings to Michael and Catherine in a closed-door meeting. The data is clear, I concluded. These remote arrangements were created ad hoc without proper infrastructure or accountability. Consolidating these roles at headquarters will improve collaboration and reduce redundancy. This affects 17 positions, Catherine noted, reviewing the list, including Daniel Collins. Yes, His role duplicates functions we already have covered by the team here, at a higher cost point due to the Seattle office overhead. And given your history with him, you're confident this recommendation is purely business-driven? She asked directly. I met her gaze steadily. I've documented every metric and consideration. The recommendation stands on its merits. But if you're concerned about the appearance of conflict, I'm happy to recuse myself from this particular decision. It was a calculated risk, but one I was confident in taking. The documentation was impeccable, and I knew Catherine's business sense would override any reservations about my motivations. After a moment, she nodded. The analysis is thorough. Michael, thoughts? I agree with the recommendations, he said. Let's proceed with the consolidation plan. One down, one to go. The following week, I called Daniel personally to deliver the news. A courtesy call, I explained, given our history of working together. Due to operational restructuring, we're eliminating the Seattle position effective July 15th. I informed him, my tone professionally regretful. We're offering a standard severance package, 3 months salary and benefits continuation. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. This is about Sarah, isn't it? He finally said, his voice tight. This is about business efficiency, Daniel. Your position has been evaluated against objective metrics, and unfortunately, it doesn't justify the additional costs of maintaining the Seattle office. Bullshit, he hissed. You orchestrated this whole thing, the acquisition, your promotion, just to get back at us. I allowed a hint of steel to enter my voice. That's quite an accusation, one that suggests I have considerably more power and influence than any single executive could possibly wield. I'm flattered you think so highly of my capabilities. You won't get away with this. I'll fight it. Wrongful termination, conflict of interest. On what grounds? I interrupted smoothly. Every aspect of this decision is documented and supported by data. Your performance metrics, the cost analysis, the strategic rationale. Feel free to consult an attorney, but I should warn you that challenging this decision could result in the company reducing or eliminating the severance offer. Another long silence. You've turned into a real bastard, you know that? He finally said. Perhaps. Or perhaps I've simply become a more effective executive. The HR department will be in touch with details about your transition. Good luck, Daniel. I hung up feeling a surge of satisfaction that I allowed myself to enjoy for exactly 1 minute before returning to my next task. The marketing department restructuring memo needed finalizing before Caroline's arrival next week. Caroline Vega arrived like a whirlwind, immediately scheduling individual meetings with every member of the marketing team. I briefed her on the department's strengths and weaknesses, carefully objective in my assessment of each team member, including Sarah. She has strong creative instincts and client relationships, I noted, but has been resistant to digital innovation. Her campaign strategies still heavily favor traditional channels despite diminishing returns. Caroline nodded, taking notes. And what role do you envision for her in the restructured department? That's entirely your decision, I replied. I've outlined the skill sets needed for the new direction, but staffing choices are yours to make based on your evaluations. Caroline studied me for a moment. You know, most executives in your position would be more directive about their ex-wife's role. I kept my expression neutral. You're aware of our personal situation. HR briefed me, she confirmed, to prevent any awkwardness. Then you understand why I'm being particularly careful to maintain professional boundaries. My personal history with Sarah has no bearing on departmental decisions. Caroline seemed satisfied with this answer. I appreciate that. I'll form my own opinions based on my meetings. Over the next 2 weeks, Caroline conducted her assessment of the marketing team. I kept my distance, focusing on other aspects of the company's operations. The longer Sarah remained in uncertainty, the better. In mid-July, Caroline presented her reorganization plan to the executive team. As I had hoped, her vision for the department involved significant changes in leadership structure and responsibilities. I'm proposing 3 team leads reporting directly to me, she explained, displaying an organizational chart. Digital strategy, creative development, and client relations. Sarah's name appeared under creative development, 2 levels down from her current position, with a note indicating transitional role. And what does transitional mean in this context? Michael asked. It means I see value in Sarah's creative abilities, but not in a leadership capacity, Caroline explained frankly. Her skill set is out of alignment with our strategic direction. I'm recommending a 6-month transition period during which she'll train her replacement and support ongoing campaigns, after which we should revisit the need for her position. I maintained a thoughtfully concerned expression, as if this conclusion troubled me despite its business logic. That's a significant demotion, I noted. Have you discussed this with her yet? Not the details, no. I wanted executive approval first. Michael glanced at me. James, given your unique situation, should you recuse yourself from this decision? I don't believe that's necessary. I replied carefully. Caroline has conducted an independent assessment based on business requirements. My input won't change those facts. After some additional discussion, the plan was approved. Caroline would meet with affected team members individually the following day to discuss their new roles. That evening, I worked late, knowing Sarah would likely seek me out after her meeting with Caroline. Sure enough, just after 6 p.m., she appeared in my office doorway, her face flushed with anger. Don't pretend you weren't behind this, she said without preamble, closing the door behind her. I looked up from my computer with an expression of mild inquiry. Behind what? This organization. This transitional role that's clearly designed to force me out. Caroline developed that plan based on her professional assessment. I replied evenly. I had no input on individual placements. Right. Sarah's laugh was bitter. Just like you had no input on firing Daniel. It's all just coincidence that the two people you hate most are being systematically pushed out. I leaned back in my chair studying her. Is that what you think is happening? I know it is. You're using your position to exact revenge. That's quite dramatic, Sarah. Daniel's position was eliminated based on documented business needs. Your role is changing because our new marketing director sees a different path forward. These are normal business decisions. Normal. She stepped closer, her voice dropping. You bought the company, James. You used your family money and orchestrated this whole takeover. Don't insult my intelligence by pretending this is just business as usual. So she had figured it out. Impressive. That's an interesting theory, I said calmly. Elaborate and completely unprovable. I don't need to prove it. We both know it's true. She placed her hands on my desk, leaning forward. What I don't understand is why you didn't just divorce me and move on. Why go to these extremes? I met her gaze, dropping the pretense for the first time. Because you and Daniel took something from me that can't be restored with a simple divorce. My trust, my dignity, my future as I had imagined it. So this is your solution? Destroying our careers? Becoming this cold, calculating person I don't even recognize. I prefer to think of it as reclaiming control of my life. She straightened, shaking her head slowly. You know what's ironic? When I ended things with Daniel, which I did immediately after you found us, I told him that what I regretted most was hurting the kindest, most decent man I'd ever known. I don't think that man exists anymore. He died in our bedroom 7 months ago, I said quietly. Sarah looked at me for a long moment, her eyes filling with tears. I'm resigning, not giving you the satisfaction of firing me. That's your choice. It's my only choice, and you know it. She moved toward the door, then paused. I hope this brings you the peace you're looking for, James. But I doubt it will. After she left, I sat motionless for several minutes, staring at the door. The satisfaction I'd expected to feel was muted, complicated by an unexpected hollowness. I had achieved exactly what I'd set out to do, methodically dismantled the lives of the two people who had betrayed me. Yet the victory felt strangely empty. I pushed the feeling aside and returned to my work. The plan was complete. Both Sarah and Daniel were out of my life, my company, my future. I had reclaimed control in the most absolute way possible. So why did it feel like I had lost something more essential than I had gained? The summer passed in a blur of work and solitude. I threw myself into my COO role with renewed focus, determined to prove my value beyond the revenge that had motivated my ascension. The company was thriving under the new leadership, with our stock price climbing steadily and new client acquisitions exceeding projections. Sarah left without serving notice, using accumulated vacation time for her final 2 weeks. Her resignation letter was brief and professional, containing nothing that could damage her severance package or future employment prospects. She was smarter than Daniel in that regard. I signed off on both their severance packages without comment. Standard terms, nothing punitive that might suggest personal animus. Everything by the book, properly documented, legally unassailable. In August, I finally filed for divorce, using Ben's firm to handle the process. Sarah didn't contest anything, agreeing to my proposed division of assets without negotiation. Our house sold quickly, and I used my portion of the proceeds to buy a sleek downtown condominium with floor-to-ceiling windows and none of the memories that had haunted our former home. By all external measures, I had won, completely and absolutely. Yet in the quiet evenings alone in my new condo, looking out at the city lights, I found myself increasingly troubled by a simple question. What now? The driving force that had propelled me through the last year, the cold, focused rage, the meticulous planning, the single-minded pursuit of retribution, was gone, leaving a vacuum I didn't know how to fill. One Saturday in September, almost exactly a year after discovering Sarah's betrayal, I was working in my home office when my phone rang. It was Catherine Westbrook. "James," she said without preamble, "are you busy tonight? Michael and I are having a small dinner at my home, and I'd like you to join us." The invitation surprised me. While our professional relationship was strong, we rarely socialized outside of work functions. "I'd be happy to," I replied. "Excellent. 8 o'clock. Bringing anyone?" "No, just me." "Perfect. See you then." Catherine's home was an elegant modernist structure in the city's most exclusive neighborhood. When I arrived, I discovered that small dinner meant just 4 people: Catherine, Michael, myself, and a woman I didn't recognize. "James, meet Elise Chen," Catherine said as she made introductions. Elise is the CEO of Vertex Innovations, one of our portfolio companies. Elise was striking, tall, with short dark hair and intelligent eyes that assessed me frankly as we shook hands. "The famous James Preston," she said with a slight smile. "Catherine's been singing your praises." The dinner was pleasant, the conversation flowing easily between business topics and more personal subjects. Elise had an incisive mind and dry wit that I found unexpectedly engaging. It had been months since I'd had a conversation that wasn't directly related to work or my divorce. After dinner, as Catherine and Michael moved to the living room to open a special bottle of port, Elise and I stepped onto the terrace overlooking the city. "So," she said, leaning against the railing, "are you going to tell me why Catherine is so obviously trying to set us up?" I laughed, surprised by her directness. "Is that what's happening?" "Obviously. The question is why the managing partner of Westbrook is playing matchmaker for her COO. I considered my response carefully. Perhaps she thinks I need a life beyond the office. "And do you?" Elise asked, studying me with those perceptive eyes. "I've been focused on work this past year. I heard the wunderkind who helped engineer the Amdex acquisition and then became its COO. Very impressive." She took a sip of her wine. "I also heard about your personal situation." I stiffened slightly. "What exactly did you hear?" "Just that you went through a difficult divorce." Catherine mentioned it, so I wouldn't inadvertently step on any landmines. She smiled slightly. "I've been there myself 3 years ago." "It's not easy." I relaxed marginally. "No, it's not. Want some unsolicited advice from someone who's a bit further down that road?" "Why not?" "At some point, you have to decide what you're moving toward, not just what you're moving away from." She held my gaze. "Revenge and ambition are powerful motivators, but they make poor foundations for a life." I felt a chill at how accurately she had read me. "That's quite an assessment based on one dinner conversation." Elise shrugged. "I'm good at reading people. It's why Catherine wanted us to meet, I suspect. We're similar in many ways." When I returned home that night, I found myself thinking about Elise's words. What was I moving toward? For the past year, every decision, every action had been in service of my elaborate revenge. Now that it was complete, what purpose would drive me forward? The question haunted me through the night. The next morning, on impulse, I drove to the park where Sarah and I used to have Sunday picnics. It was a beautiful early autumn day, the trees just beginning to show hints of gold and red. I walked to our usual spot by the small lake and sat on a bench, watching families with young children feeding the ducks. Sarah and I had talked about having children. We'd planned to start trying after her promotion, wanting to be financially secure before taking that step. Another future erased by her betrayal and my response to it. A text message interrupted my thoughts. It was from Elise. "Enjoyed meeting you last night. Coffee sometime?" I found myself smiling as I typed a response. "I'd like that." As I drove home, I realized something had shifted within me. The hollow feeling that had plagued me since completing my revenge wasn't emptiness. It was space. Space for something new to grow. The following week, I had coffee with Elise. Our conversation ranged widely, from business philosophy to favorite books to travel stories. She was brilliant, ambitious, and utterly straightforward. Qualities I had always valued but now appreciated with new awareness. "Tell me something," she said as we were finishing. "If Amdex continues its current growth trajectory, what's next for you?" "I haven't thought much beyond our current expansion plans," I admitted. "That's not true," she said with that penetrating gaze. "Someone who orchestrated what you did always has a next move in mind." I raised an eyebrow. "You seem very certain about what I did or didn't orchestrate. Catherine doesn't make personal investments in acquisition targets alongside promising executives unless she sees something extraordinary. And from what I've observed, you are extraordinary, James. She leaned forward slightly. But you're at a crossroads. You can either remain defined by what happened to you, or you can use that same remarkable focus and determination to build something genuinely meaningful. And what would you consider meaningful? I asked, genuinely curious. That's for you to decide, she replied. But I suspect it involves creating rather than dismantling. Her words stayed with me in the days that followed. I began to look more critically at what I had accomplished and what truly gave me satisfaction. The operational improvements I'd implemented at Amdex, the mentoring I'd done with junior team members, the innovative security protocols I'd developed that were now industry standards. None of these achievements had anything to do with revenge. In October, on the anniversary of the day I discovered Sarah and Daniel together, I received an unexpected email from Sarah. The subject line was simply, closure. James, I debated whether to write this, but it feels necessary, for me at least. Today marks 1 year since everything fell apart, and I wanted to acknowledge it. What I did was unforgivable. Not just the affair, but choosing Daniel, someone you trusted and mentored. There's no excuse, though in my darkest moments I've tried to find one. The truth is simpler and harder. I made a terrible, selfish choice, and it destroyed something precious. I'm moving to Chicago next week. A fresh start. Daniel is in Portland now, from what I hear. Your plan worked perfectly. We've both been removed from your life, professionally and personally. I hope you find what you're looking for, James. I hope that what happened between us doesn't define the rest of your life the way it defined this past year. You deserve better than that. With regret and best wishes, Sarah. I read the email several times, surprised by the complex emotions it stirred. There was no triumph in knowing she understood exactly what I had done, only a weary recognition that we had all lost something irreplaceable. That evening, I met Elise for dinner. Halfway through the meal, she studied me thoughtfully. You seem different tonight. More prickly, present. I told her about Sarah's email and my reaction to it. And how do you feel about it? She asked. Like I've been holding my breath for a year and can finally exhale, I admitted. The revenge consumed me so completely that I lost sight of who I was apart from it. And who are you apart from it? I considered the question seriously. I'm still figuring that out. But I know I want to build things again, not just tear them down. She smiled, a genuine warmth in her eyes. That sounds like a good place to start. Later that night, I replied to Sarah's email. Sarah, thank you for your email. You're right that what happened defined this past year for all of us in ways that none of us anticipated. I wish you well in Chicago. I hope you find the fresh start you're looking for. James. It wasn't forgiveness. I wasn't sure I would ever reach that point, but it was an acknowledgement that the chapter was closing for both of us. The next morning, I scheduled a meeting with Catherine and Michael to discuss a new idea I'd been developing, a cybersecurity initiative that could position Amdex at the forefront of the industry. As I prepared my presentation, I felt a familiar sense of focus and determination, but this time directed toward creating something valuable rather than executing revenge. I glanced at the copy of The Count of Monte Cristo on my bookshelf, Sarah's final gift to me. In the novel, Edmond Dantes achieves his elaborate revenge, but discovers that vengeance doesn't bring him peace. Only when he moves beyond his quest for retribution does he find a path forward. Perhaps I was finally ready to write my own next chapter. The meeting with Catherine and Michael went better than I expected. They were immediately receptive to my cybersecurity initiative, seeing its potential to differentiate Amdex in an increasingly competitive market. Catherine, in particular, seemed pleased by my shift in focus. This is exactly the kind of forward thinking we invested in, she said, studying the 5-year roadmap I'd outlined. It leverages your technical background and addresses a growing market need. Michael nodded in agreement. The timing is perfect, too. Our clients are increasingly concerned about data breaches. If we can position ourselves as leaders in this space, it could accelerate our growth considerably. By the time I left the meeting, we had preliminary approval for a substantial budget allocation and the authority to build a specialized team. For the first time in over a year, I felt genuinely excited about the future. Not because it would advance some hidden agenda, but because I was creating something valuable. That evening, I called Elise to share the news. Congratulations, she said warmly, though I'm not surprised they approved it. The idea has tremendous potential. Thanks for your input on the proposal, I replied. Your suggestions about integration with existing enterprise systems made it much stronger. Happy to help. There was a brief pause before she added, I'm heading to San Francisco next week for a tech conference. Any chance you could join me? There's a cybersecurity panel that might be relevant to your new initiative. The invitation caught me off guard. You want me to come to San Francisco? Well, the conference is the professional justification, she said with a hint of amusement in her voice. But yes, I'd like to spend more time with you outside of coffee shops and business dinners. I found myself smiling. I'd like that too. Let me check my calendar and get back to you tomorrow. After we hung up, I sat in my living room, looking out at the night skyline, feeling something I hadn't experienced in a long time. Possibility. The future wasn't just a continuation of my revenge plot. It was an open road with multiple paths. The realization was both liberating and terrifying. I joined Elise in San Francisco the following week. The conference was interesting, the cybersecurity panel particularly relevant to my new initiative. But the real value of the trip was the time we spent together away from our usual context. We walked along the Embarcadero in the early morning fog, talking about our childhoods, our families, our values. We shared a memorable dinner at a small restaurant in North Beach, where Elise told me about her divorce. A painful separation after discovering her ex-husband's financial deceptions had nearly bankrupted their shared business. I wanted to destroy him, she admitted over dessert. I had the evidence to ruin not just his personal reputation, but his professional future. I came very close to doing it. What stopped you? I asked, genuinely curious. My mentor at the time told me something I've never forgotten. The energy you spend destroying someone else's life is energy you're not spending building your own. She met my eyes. So I made a choice. I used that anger, that pain, as fuel to rebuild what he'd nearly taken from me. 3 years later, the company I salvaged is worth 10 times what it was when we split. Impressive, I said, meaning it. She shrugged slightly. The point is, I understand the impulse for revenge. I lived with it, breathed it, for months. But there came a time when I had to decide what mattered more, making him pay or creating the life I wanted. I recognized the parallel she was drawing to my situation. Are you suggesting I made the wrong choice? Not at all. She reached across the table, her fingers lightly touching mine. I think you did what you needed to do at the time. The question is whether it's still serving you. The simple touch of her hand on mine sent an unexpected current through me. Connection, attraction, possibility. When her fingers interlaced with mine, I realized how much I'd missed this kind of intimacy. Not just physical, but emotional. The willingness to be vulnerable with another person. We spent the weekend exploring the city, deliberately avoiding work conversations. On our last night walking back to the hotel after dinner, Elise slipped her hand into mine as naturally as if we'd been doing it for years. I've enjoyed this, she said simply. So have I. I hesitated, then added, more than I expected to. She smiled at that. High praise from James Preston. At her hotel room door, she turned to face me. I should warn you about something. What's that? I don't do casual relationships. If this is going somewhere, and I think it might be, I'm looking for something real. Her directness was refreshing. Given what you've been through, I need to know if that's even on the table for you. I considered her question seriously. A year ago, it wouldn't have been. But now, I met her gaze. I think it could be, if we take it slowly. She nodded, seemingly satisfied with my answer. Slowly works for me. When she kissed me goodnight, it wasn't passionate or desperate, but deliberate and full of promise. The beginning of something with potential rather than the culmination of a moment. On the flight home the next day, I realized how much had changed in my life in just a few short weeks. The cold, calculating man focused solely on revenge was giving way to someone more balanced, more forward-looking. The pain of Sarah's betrayal hadn't disappeared, but it was no longer the defining force in my life. Progress, not perfection. November brought new challenges at Amdex as we began implementing the cybersecurity initiative. I assembled a team of top talent, including several specialists recruited from competitors. The work was demanding but deeply satisfying, especially when our first proprietary security protocol exceeded performance expectations in initial testing. My relationship with Elise developed steadily as well. We saw each other at least once a week, often coordinating our schedules so we could spend weekends together. She was as focused and driven in her personal life as she was professionally, but also surprisingly playful in private moments. You're different with me than you are with others, she observed one evening as we cooked dinner together in my condo. More relaxed, almost, yas, lighter. I feel lighter with you, I admitted. Like I don't have to maintain the armor. What armor is that? The COO persona. Controlled, strategic, always 3 steps ahead. I stirred the risotto slowly. It's exhausting sometimes. She nodded thoughtfully. Personas often are, especially the ones we create to protect ourselves after being hurt. Her insight was uncomfortably accurate. When did you become such an expert on my psychology? I'm not. She laughed, bumping her hip against mine playfully. But I recognize the pattern because I lived it. After my divorce, I became hyper-competent, completely self-sufficient. I decided I didn't need anyone. It was protection. And now? Now I understand that being strong doesn't mean being invulnerable. She looked up at me. The real strength is in being willing to risk getting hurt again. Later that night, as we lay together in the darkness of my bedroom, I found myself telling her the complete truth about what I had done, the full extent of my revenge plan, not just the outline she had already inferred. How I had systematically used my position to remove both Sarah and Daniel from my life and the company. How calculated it had been, how coldly executed. Are you trying to scare me away? She asked when I finished, her hand resting lightly on my chest. Maybe, I admitted. Or maybe I'm testing whether you can accept the worst of me. I'm not easily frightened, James, and I don't judge people by their worst moments or decisions. She propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at me in the dim light. What matters to me is who you're choosing to be now. And if I'm still figuring that out, then we figure it out together. She leaned down and kissed me softly. Just don't shut me out of the process. That night marked a turning point in our relationship and in my recovery from the person I had become in the wake of Sarah's betrayal. Elise had seen the darkest version of me and hadn't turned away. It created a foundation of trust I hadn't expected to find again. As the holiday season approached, I faced the prospect of my first Thanksgiving and Christmas alone. My parents had moved to Arizona after retirement and were traveling internationally for the holidays. I had distanced myself from our mutual friends after the separation from Sarah and hadn't yet rebuilt that social circle. Elise, sensing my unease as the holidays approached, invited me to join her family for Thanksgiving at her brother's home in the suburbs. It's very casual, she assured me. Just my brother's family, my parents, and a couple of close friends. No pressure. Despite her assurances, I felt unusually nervous as we drove to her brother's house. Meeting family felt significant, a step towards something more permanent than I had allowed myself to consider. They're going to love you, Elise said, reaching over to squeeze my hand as I drove. Just be yourself. Which version? I asked, only half joking. The one I know. She smiled. The real one. Her family was warm and welcoming, accepting me without the awkward questions I had feared. Her brother Michael was a high school principal with a quick wit and an easy laugh. His wife Lucia, a pediatrician, had the same direct manner as Elise. Their twin daughters, 10 years old and precociously intelligent, immediately dragged me into a heated debate about the best superhero movies. Elise's parents were in their 70s but vibrant and engaged. Her father, a retired engineering professor, questioned me thoroughly about the cybersecurity initiative, his interest genuine and his insights surprisingly relevant. Her mother, a former social worker, had Elise's perceptive eyes and observant nature. You've had a difficult year, she said quietly when we found ourselves alone in the kitchen after dinner. Elise mentioned some of it. I tensed slightly. Did she tell you everything? Enough. She smiled gently. But that's past. I can see how you look at my daughter. Like she's something precious you're afraid to hope for. The accuracy of her observation left me momentarily speechless. It's all right to hope again, you know, she continued, patting my arm. That's how we heal. Later that evening, driving back to the city with Elise asleep against my shoulder, I realized how much I had needed that day. Not just the warmth of family, but the reminder that life continues, evolves, offers second chances. December brought the first serious challenge to my new perspective. The cybersecurity team was making excellent progress, with our first product nearly ready for beta testing, when I received an unexpected email. Subject: Reconnecting from Daniel Collins. James, I've debated sending this email for months. After everything that happened, you probably don't want to hear from me, and I wouldn't blame you. I'm writing because I'm applying for a position at Vertex Innovations, and I've learned that you're close with their CEO, Elise Chen. I don't expect any favors, but I wanted to address the situation directly rather than having you discover my application through other channels. What happened last year was inexcusable. The affair with Sarah was a terrible mistake that I regret profoundly. We were both in bad places personally, but that's no excuse for betraying your trust and friendship. I understand why you did what you did with the company. I might have done the same in your position. I've spent the past year rebuilding my career and myself. The position at Vertex is a perfect fit for my skills, and I'm asking only for a fair evaluation based on my qualifications, not our history. Regardless of what happens with the job, I owed you this apology. Daniel, I stared at the message for a long time, conflicting emotions churning within me. The old anger was there, but diminished like a faded photograph. Stronger was a sense of bitter irony. Of all the companies in all the world, he had to apply to the one run by the woman I was dating. I forwarded the email to Elise with a brief note. Thought you should see this. The Daniel mentioned is my former colleague. She called me immediately. Well, this is awkward, she said without preamble. His resume came across my desk yesterday. He's actually very qualified for the position. I'm sure he is, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. He was always good at his job. James, I need to know if this is going to be a problem. If hiring him would create issues between us. The question was fair, and I took a moment to consider it honestly. 6 months ago, the mere thought of Daniel working with someone connected to me would have been intolerable. Now it was uncomfortable, but not devastating. It won't create issues. I finally said, your hiring decisions are your business. I don't expect you to reject qualified candidates because of my personal history. You're sure? She sounded skeptical. I'm working on being sure. I amended. This is part of moving forward, right? Not letting the past dictate every decision. Right. She agreed, her voice softening. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you for that perspective. Not everyone would be so reasonable. After we hung up, I sat at my desk contemplating how to respond to Daniel's email. The old James would have either ignored it entirely or sent a coldly dismissive reply. But that approach no longer felt right. Finally, I wrote, Daniel, I appreciate your email and the directness of your approach regarding the position at Vertex. While our personal history is complicated, I have no intention of interfering with Vertex's hiring process. Elise runs her company independently, and hiring decisions are entirely her domain. I understand that people make mistakes, sometimes terrible ones. The past year has taught me a lot about the cost of those mistakes and about the cost of dwelling on them indefinitely. I wish you well in your career endeavors, whatever they may be. James Warren, I reread the message several times before sending it, ensuring it conveyed neither false forgiveness nor lingering animosity. It was perhaps the most honest communication I'd had with Daniel since discovering his betrayal. That night, I told Elise about my response. I think you made the right call, she said thoughtfully. For yourself more than for him. What do you mean? Holding on to that level of anger and resentment takes tremendous energy. Energy better spent elsewhere. She curled against my side on the couch. For what it's worth, I had already decided to interview him based on his qualifications. But if you had asked me not to, I would have respected that. I know, I said, kissing the top of her head. That's one of the reasons I didn't ask. The cybersecurity initiative officially launched in January, with our first product entering beta testing with selected clients. The initial feedback was overwhelmingly positive, validating both the concept and our implementation approach. Michael and Catherine were delighted, with Catherine going so far as to describe it as potentially transformative for Amdex's market position. The success should have been purely satisfying, but I found myself increasingly restless. The COO role, which had once been the perfect vehicle for my revenge plans, now felt somehow constraining. I was good at it. The operational challenges, the strategic planning, the leadership aspects, but it didn't engage my technical skills the way my previous role had. You miss being closer to the technology, Elise observed one evening after listening to me describe a frustrating day of budget meetings. It's obvious when you talk about the cybersecurity work versus the general operations. Maybe, I acknowledge. But that's the price of advancement, isn't it? The higher you climb, the further you get from the hands-on work. She shook her head. That's conventional thinking. The best leaders structure their roles to leverage their strengths, not fit themselves into predetermined boxes. Her words stayed with me, prompting me to reconsider not just my current role, but my longer-term career path. What did I actually want now that revenge was no longer my driving motivation? The question lingered as January turned to February. Elise and I settled into a comfortable rhythm, spending most weekends together and several nights during the week. We hadn't officially moved in together, but more and more of her things migrated to my condo, and I kept an increasing number of items at her place. In late February, almost exactly a year after the acquisition, Catherine invited me to lunch at her private club. After brief pleasantries, she got straight to the point, a trait I had always appreciated about her. The board is extremely pleased with the cybersecurity initiative, she said. It's already generating significant client interest and has positioned us well against competitors. Thank you. The team has done exceptional work. Yes, they have. She studied me over her water glass. Which brings me to the purpose of this lunch. We're considering a structural reorganization that would split the COO role into two positions, Chief Operating Officer and Chief Technology Officer. Given your background and the success of the cybersecurity initiative, we'd like to offer you the CTO position. The offer caught me completely by surprise. You want me to step down as COO? Not down. Sideways. She smiled slightly. The compensation would be identical, and you'd remain on the executive team with the same level of influence. But instead of overseeing all operations, you'd focus specifically on our technology strategy and implementation. Who would take the COO role? We're considering external candidates, but I wanted to discuss this with you first. Your input on the selection would be valuable. I considered the proposal carefully. The CTO position would align better with my technical background and interests. It would allow me to be more directly involved with product development while maintaining executive-level influence. I appreciate the offer, I said. Can I have a few days to think about it? Of course. Take the weekend to consider. We can talk again on Monday. That evening, I discussed the opportunity with Elise over dinner at her apartment. Sounds perfect for you, she said after I explained the proposed restructuring. You light up when you talk about the technical challenges. The operational stuff? Not so much. But it could be seen as a demotion, I pointed out. Moving from COO to CTO. By whom? The same people who gossip about office politics no matter what happens? She shook her head. The question isn't how it looks to others. It's whether it aligns with what you actually want to do. And if I'm not sure what that is anymore. She reached across the table, taking my hand. Then maybe this is the time to figure it out. Not based on reactions to the past, but on building the future you want. Over the weekend, I reflected deeply on the decision. The COO role had served its purpose. It had given me the authority to execute my revenge plan and establish myself as a key leader in the post-acquisition company. But now that those goals were accomplished, did I still want that particular job? The more I considered it, the clearer the answer became. The aspects of my work that truly energized me were all technology-related. Developing new security protocols, envisioning system architectures, solving complex technical challenges. The CTO role would allow me to focus on those areas while maintaining executive influence. On Monday morning, I met with Catherine and accepted the CTO position. The transition would take place over the next month, with a formal announcement once a new COO was selected. I think this is the right move, Catherine said as we concluded our meeting, for both you and the company. I think so too, I replied, surprised by how right the decision felt. It's time for a new challenge. March brought warming temperatures and new beginnings. The company announced the reorganization, presenting it as a strategic move to strengthen our technology focus. To my relief, most colleagues seemed to view it exactly that way, with many congratulating me on a role that better matched my technical expertise. The search for a new COO progressed quickly, with Catherine and Michael identifying a promising candidate from a competitor. Jennifer Rhodes had an impressive track record in operations management and a reputation for building strong teams. When we met for the first time, I was immediately struck by her straightforward manner and clear vision for the role. I've reviewed the organizational structure, she said after introductions. The split makes sense given the company's strategic direction, but it will require close coordination between our positions. Agreed, I replied. I'm committed to making the transition as smooth as possible. She studied me for a moment. I understand you were instrumental in the acquisition last year. I was involved, yes. A knowing smile crossed her face. More than involved, from what I've heard, it was quite the strategic move. Something in her tone suggested she understood the full story, or at least suspected it. The acquisition has been beneficial for the company, I said carefully. Clearly, she leaned forward slightly. I admire decisive action, James. We'll work well together. Jennifer started in early April, and the transition proved smoother than I had anticipated. Freed from the broader operational responsibilities, I immersed myself in the technology aspects of the business. The cybersecurity initiative expanded rapidly, with additional products in development and growing client adoption of our initial offering. My personal life stabilized as well. Elise and I celebrated 6 months together with a weekend trip to a coastal resort, where we had the conversation we'd been circling for weeks. My lease is up next month, she mentioned casually as we walked along the beach at sunset. I'm considering my options. What kind of options? I asked, though I suspected I knew where the conversation was heading. Well, renewing is one option. She glanced at me sideways. Moving in together would be another. I smiled, taking her hand. That's quite a coincidence. I've been thinking my condo feels too empty when you're not there. Is that so? Her voice was light, but her eyes were serious. And have you reached any conclusions about that situation? I have, actually. I stopped walking, turning to face her. I think you should move in with me. Or we could find a new place together, if you prefer. Either way, I want us to live together. Her smile was radiant. Your place is perfect. And much closer to my office than my current apartment. Always the practical CEO. I laughed, pulling her close. Not always, she whispered, kissing me softly. Sometimes I'm quite impractical. Like falling in love with a man who bought a company for revenge. The words hung between us. The first time either of us had explicitly mentioned love. Is that what happened? I asked quietly. You fell in love with me? I did. Her eyes held mine, confident and clear. Somewhere between San Francisco and that Thanksgiving with my family. Is that going to be a problem for you? Only if you expect me to pretend I haven't fallen in love with you too. The admission felt both terrifying and liberating. A commitment to something new, something hopeful, something entirely unrelated to the pain and betrayal that had defined the previous year of my life. Lise moved into my condo in May, a process that revealed both our compatibility and our differences. She was minimal and organized, while I had accumulated more possessions than I realized. We compromised on decor, blending her contemporary aesthetic with my more traditional preferences, creating a space that felt genuinely shared. Around the same time, I heard through industry channels that Sarah had taken a senior position with a major agency in Chicago. According to mutual connections, she was doing well professionally, having rebuilt her career after the setback of leaving Amdex. I was surprised to realize that the news caused me no distress, not even a twinge of the old anger or pain. It simply felt like information about a person from my past, relevant but not emotional. Progress indeed. In late May, Daniel contacted me again, this time with news. James, I wanted to let you know that I've accepted a position with Vertex. During the interview process, I had several conversations with Elise about our history. She was direct about her relationship with you and made it clear that any personal issues would not be tolerated in the professional environment. I've committed to maintaining strictly professional boundaries and focusing solely on the work. The position is based in their Austin office, so our paths are unlikely to cross frequently, if at all. I don't expect a response to this message, but felt you deserved to know directly rather than hearing it elsewhere. Daniel, I forwarded the email to Elise with a brief note. No issues from my side. Hope he works out well for Vertex. She called me from her office. You're really okay with this? I am. I replied, somewhat surprised by how true it was. His career isn't my concern anymore, and I trust your judgment. Thank you for that, she said, her voice warm. For what it's worth, he was the most qualified candidate by a significant margin, and very forthright about the situation during the interviews. Then I hope he does well there. After we hung up, I reflected on how much had changed in the past year. The man who had orchestrated an entire company acquisition, largely to exact revenge, would never have accepted his ex-wife's lover working for his current partner. But that man was fading, replaced by someone more balanced, more focused on building a future than avenging the past. Summer brought new opportunities and challenges. The cybersecurity initiative continued to exceed expectations, generating substantial new revenue and establishing Amdex as an emerging leader in the field. As CTO, I found myself increasingly in the public eye, giving interviews to industry publications and speaking at conferences about our innovative approach. You're becoming quite the thought leader, Michael observed after a particularly successful press event in July. The board is very pleased with the visibility you're bringing to the company. It's the team's work that deserves the recognition. I replied, I'm just the spokesperson. Don't underestimate your contribution, he countered. Your vision drove this initiative from the beginning. The praise was gratifying, especially coming from Michael, who was typically reserved with compliments. But even more satisfying was the genuine enjoyment I found in the work itself, in solving complex problems, in mentoring younger team members, in creating something valuable. My relationship with Elise deepened as well. Living together revealed new dimensions of compatibility and occasionally friction. We both worked long hours and brought that intensity home sometimes. Learning to transition from professional mode to personal connection took conscious effort from both of us. We need boundaries. Elise declared one night after we'd both been working on our laptops for hours after dinner, no work after 9 p.m. unless it's a genuine emergency, and one full day every weekend that's completely work-free. Agreed, I said, closing my laptop immediately. Starting now, those boundaries proved essential to our relationship's health, creating space for us to simply be together without the pressures of our demanding careers. We developed small rituals: Sunday morning coffee on our balcony, impromptu dance sessions in the kitchen, weekly movie nights where we alternated choices. In August, a year after Catherine's dinner party where Elise and I had first met, she invited us to her lake house for a weekend gathering. The guest list included several Westbrook executives and their partners, along with Michael and his wife. On the second evening, after dinner on the lakeside terrace, Catherine raised her glass in a toast to successful partnerships, both professional and personal. Her knowing glance between Elise and me made clear the double meaning. Later, as Elise and I walked along the moonlit shore, she asked, "Do you ever think about how differently things might have turned out if Catherine hadn't played matchmaker that night?" "Sometimes," I admitted. "If I hadn't channeled all that anger and pain into the acquisition plan, if I hadn't met you at exactly that moment in my life, everything would be different." "Regrets?" she asked quietly. I considered the question seriously. "About meeting you?" "Not for a second." "About how I handled the situation with Sarah and Daniel?" I paused. "I don't regret ensuring they were removed from my daily life. That was necessary for my sanity. But the coldness of it, the calculation, that part doesn't sit well with me anymore." She nodded, understanding. Growth isn't about erasing the past. It's about integrating it, acknowledging what happened and how it shaped you, without letting it define you moving forward. "When did you get so wise?" I asked, pulling her close. "I've always been wise." She laughed. "You're just finally catching up." In September, exactly 2 years after discovering Sarah's betrayal, I received an unexpected phone call from Sarah's father. His health had declined again, he explained, and he wanted to speak with me while he still could. I visited him the following day at his home, where he was now receiving hospice care. Despite his frail physical condition, his mind remained sharp. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice weaker than I remembered, but his eyes still bright. "Wasn't sure you would." "Of course I came," I replied, sitting in the chair beside his bed. "How are you feeling?" "Like a man saying his goodbyes." He smiled faintly. "Which is why I wanted to see you, to clear the air before I go." "There's no need." "There is," he interrupted gently. "I know what happened, James. Not just Sarah's mistake, but what came after." "What you did." I tensed. "Tina, what do you mean?" "The company, the takeover, how you arranged for both of them to lose their positions." He held up a frail hand when I started to speak. "I'm not judging you. If someone had hurt my daughter that way, I might have done worse." "Sarah told you?" I asked, surprised. "She figured it out herself. She's always been smart, even when her judgment failed her." He sighed heavily. "She told me last Christmas, said she understood why you did it, that she would have done the same in your place." I didn't know how to respond to that. The idea that Sarah understood, even accepted what I had done was unexpected. "I wanted you to know something," he continued. "She's built a good life in Chicago. New job, new friends. She's seeing someone now, a doctor she met through her sister. Good man from what I can tell." "I'm glad," I said, surprised to realize I meant it. "She deserves to be happy. So do you, son." He reached out, his hand trembling slightly, and I took it in mine. "Are you happy?" "I am," I replied, thinking of Elise, my new role, the life we were building together. "It took some time, but yes, I'm happy." "Good." He squeezed my hand weakly. "That's all I wanted to know before I go, that both of you found your way forward." We talked a while longer about lighter topics: his grandchildren, my work, memories from better times. When I finally left, I knew it would be the last time I would see him. He passed away 3 weeks later. I attended the funeral, standing at the back of the church, offering quiet condolences to Sarah's mother and sister afterward. Sarah was there with her new partner, a tall man with kind eyes who kept a supportive hand at her back. Our eyes met briefly across the room, and she gave me a small, sad smile. Acknowledgement, not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps acceptance. That evening, I told Elise about the encounter. "It felt like the end of something," I said. The final page of that chapter of my life. And how do you feel about turning that page? She asked gently. Ready, I replied. More than ready. October brought the one-year anniversary of the Cybersecurity Initiative's launch. To celebrate, I organized a team dinner at an upscale restaurant, inviting everyone who had contributed to its success. Catherine and Michael attended briefly, offering congratulations and announcing a company-wide bonus in recognition of the initiative's significant contribution to Amdex's bottom line. As I looked around the table at my team, some I had hired, others who had been with Amdex before the acquisition, I felt an unfamiliar sense of fulfillment. This was what building something looked like. This was what came after revenge, creation instead of destruction. Later that month, Elise and I took a long-planned vacation to Japan, spending 2 weeks exploring Tokyo, Kyoto, and the mountainous countryside. Away from our daily responsibilities, we talked about the future, not just the next few months, but years ahead. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? She asked one evening as we sat in a traditional onsen, steam rising around us. Professionally or personally? I asked. Both. Either. Whatever comes to mind first. I considered the question. Professionally, I want to expand the cybersecurity division into its own business unit, maybe eventually a separate company under the Amdex umbrella. I have ideas for applications beyond our current market that could open entirely new revenue streams. And personally, with you, I said simply, building a life together. Maybe. A family eventually, if that's something you want. She was quiet for a moment, and I worried I had overstepped. We hadn't discussed children before. I do want that, she finally said. Not immediately, but yes, a family with you is part of what I imagine for our future. She moved closer in the water, resting against my shoulder. I've been waiting for the right time to bring it up. And now? Now feels right. She looked up at me, steam making her skin glow in the dim light. All of it feels right, James. You, me, the life we're creating. It feels like where I'm supposed to be. The simple declaration touched something deep within me. After everything, the betrayal, the revenge, the rebuilding, here was something real and true and forward-looking. Not a reaction to pain, but a choice toward joy. When we returned from Japan in early November, I made another decision. I contacted Ben, my attorney friend, who had advised me during the divorce, and asked him to help me establish a scholarship fund at my alma mater. The fund would support students studying cybersecurity who demonstrated financial need, a way of channeling some of my resources toward creating opportunity rather than settling scores. This is different from your usual strategic moves, Ben commented when we met to finalize the details. More philanthropic than I expected. People change, I replied with a slight smile, sometimes for the better. Speaking of change, he said casually, I ran into Sarah last week. She was in town visiting her mother. How did she seem? Good. Settled. She mentioned she's engaged. He watched me carefully, clearly gauging my reaction. I heard, I said calmly. I'm happy for her. Ben's eyebrows rose slightly. Well, that's a healthy response I wouldn't have predicted a year ago. A lot has changed in a year. Clearly, he smiled. Elise is good for you. I haven't seen you this centered since before everything fell apart. His observation stayed with me as November progressed. Elise was good for me. Her directness, her emotional intelligence, her ability to challenge me without tearing me down. But our relationship wasn't just about what she gave me. It was about what we built together. Thanksgiving arrived, and this year we hosted the holiday at our condo. Elise's family joined us, along with a few close friends from both our professional circles. The apartment was filled with conversation and laughter, the dining table extended to accommodate everyone. As I looked around at the gathered faces, Elise's parents engaged in animated conversation with my colleague from the cybersecurity team, her brother and his wife laughing with my friend Ben, the twins now showing Elise photos on a phone, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. This was what came after revenge. This was the life that healing made possible. Later that night, after everyone had left and we were cleaning up together, Elise asked, "What were you thinking earlier? You had this look on your face during dinner." "I was thinking about journeys," I replied, loading the dishwasher. "How you never really know where they'll lead when you start them." "Deep thoughts for a turkey dinner," she teased. "Well, it's been quite a journey," I said, straightening up and pulling her into my arms. When I started planning the acquisition, I was solely focused on revenge. I never imagined it would lead me to you, to this life we're building. The universe has a strange sense of humor sometimes, she agreed, wrapping her arms around my waist. But I'm grateful for whatever twisted path brought you to me, even if parts of it were painful. I kissed her softly. So am I. December brought cold weather and year-end reflections. At work, the cybersecurity division continued to exceed growth projections, with new client acquisitions accelerating as our reputation in the market strengthened. The board approved my proposal for expanded research and development funding, positioning us to release several new products in the coming year. Jennifer, now firmly established as COO, proved to be an excellent partner in the executive team. Our complementary skills and straightforward communication style made for effective collaboration across departments. The company was thriving under the new structure, with employee satisfaction scores at their highest point since the acquisition. At home, Elise and I prepared for our first Christmas together, blending our separate traditions into new shared rituals. We spent a weekend selecting the perfect tree, decorating it with a combination of her modern glass ornaments and my more traditional ones. We hosted a small holiday party for close friends and made plans to visit both sets of parents during the holiday break. On Christmas Eve, after returning from a concert of holiday music, we exchanged one gift each, a tradition from my childhood that Elise had embraced. I gave her a vintage first edition book by her favorite author, found after months of searching through rare bookshops. It's perfect, she said, carefully turning the delicate pages. How did you find it? I have my resources, I replied with a smile. Open the cover. Inside, I had written a simple inscription. To Elise, who taught me that the best revenge is a life well lived. All my love, James. Her eyes softened as she read the words. That's beautiful, she whispered. Your turn, I said, accepting the small box she handed me. Inside was a key on a simple silver keychain. I looked at her questioningly. It's symbolic, she explained. A key to our future home. Are we moving? I asked, confused. Not immediately. She took a deep breath. But I found a house that I think would be perfect for us. More space, a yard, room for expansion when we're ready for that. I didn't want to make the decision without you, but I wanted to have something tangible to show you. The implication was clear. A home where we could raise a family someday. I'd love to see it, I said, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. Tomorrow afternoon? She suggested. It's empty, and the realtor gave me the code to the lockbox as a courtesy. It's a date. Later that night, as we lay in bed with the glow of the Christmas tree lights visible through the bedroom door, Elise propped herself up on one elbow. I have a question, she said, her expression serious. No. What's that? If you could go back to that day, when you found Sarah and Daniel together, would you do anything differently? I considered the question carefully. That's complex. Part of me wants to say I would have handled it with more dignity, less calculation. But then again, every step of that path, even the darker ones, led me here to you. I reached up to touch her face. So it's hard to regret choices that ultimately brought me to the best thing in my life. That's a good answer. She smiled, leaning down to kiss me. Very diplomatic. What about you? I asked. Any regrets about getting involved with someone who executed an elaborate revenge plan? Not regrets exactly. Sometimes I wonder what you would have done if we hadn't met when we did. If you would have continued down that path indefinitely, letting it consume more and more of who you are. I've wondered that too, I admitted. I like to think I would have eventually found my way back to myself, but I'm not sure. You caught me at a pivotal moment, when the revenge was complete but hadn't yet delivered the satisfaction I expected. Timing is everything, she murmured, settling against my chest. It is, I agreed, holding her close. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, the timing aligns just right. The house Elise had found was a graceful craftsman in a quiet neighborhood 20 minutes from downtown. Built in the 1920s but recently renovated, it had the character of an older home with modern amenities. 4 bedrooms, a spacious kitchen opening to a family room, a formal dining room, and a study that could serve as a home office. The backyard was modest but private, with mature trees and a small patio. As we walked through the rooms on Christmas Day, I could see why she had fallen in love with it. It wasn't just a house, it was a vision of our future together. Space for children, for family gatherings, for building a life that extended beyond our careers. What do you think? She asked as we stood in what would be the master bedroom, afternoon light streaming through the windows. I think it's perfect, I replied honestly. I can see us here. Her face lit up. Really? You're not just saying that because it's Christmas? Really? I pulled her into my arms. Should we make an offer? The market's competitive, she warned. We'd need to move quickly and potentially go above asking price. Then let's do it. Tomorrow morning, first thing. We submitted our offer the day after Christmas, and after a brief negotiation, it was accepted. The closing was set for late January, with a move-in date in early February, almost exactly 2 years after the Amdex acquisition had closed. The symmetry wasn't lost on me. 2 years ago, I had executed the final stage of an elaborate revenge plan, motivated by pain and betrayal. Now I was preparing to begin a new chapter, focused entirely on building a future with the woman I loved. In the weeks leading up to the closing, we planned the move, deciding which furniture to keep and what new pieces we would need for the larger space. We discussed paint colors and minor renovations, whether to update the kitchen appliances immediately or wait. These ordinary conversations, the mundane logistics of combining lives and creating a home, held a significance I wouldn't have appreciated before. They represented normalcy, stability, forward motion. The revenge that had consumed me for so long had no place in these discussions, no role in our plans. The night before the closing, I found myself unable to sleep. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Elise, and went to the living room window looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Sarah was building her new life with her fiancé. Daniel was establishing himself in Austin at Vertex. Life had moved on for all of us. Can't sleep? Elise's voice came softly from behind me. I turned to find her in the doorway, wrapped in her robe. Just thinking. About tomorrow? About everything. I smiled slightly. 2 years ago, I was finalizing the acquisition, focused entirely on revenge. Now we're buying a house together. She came to stand beside me, leaning against my shoulder. Life has a way of surprising us. It does. I agreed, putting my arm around her, especially when we're open to the surprises. The closing the next day was straightforward. The paperwork processed efficiently, the keys handed over with congratulations from the realtor. We drove to the house, our house afterward, walking through the empty rooms that would soon be filled with our combined lives. I have something for you, I said, reaching into my pocket. A housewarming gift. I handed her a small box. Inside was a delicate silver pendant in the shape of a key, matching the keychain she had given me for Christmas. It's beautiful, she said, touching it gently. May I? I took the necklace, fastening it around her neck. Now we both have keys to our future. She turned to face me, her eyes bright with emotion. I love you, James Preston. And I love you, Elise Chen. I took her hands in mine. Thank you for showing me there's life after revenge. A better, fuller life than I ever imagined. As we stood there in the empty room that would soon become our home, I felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with settling scores or equalizing pain. This was what healing looked like. Not the absence of past hurts, but the presence of new joy. Not forgetting what had happened, but refusing to let it determine what came next. I had caught my wife with my coworker, and in response, I had bought the company and fired them both. It was an extreme reaction born of extreme pain. But the story didn't end there. It continued beyond the revenge into rebuilding and renewal. And in that continuation, in the life that came after, I had found something I hadn't been looking for. Redemption, not from others, but from myself. The knowledge that even after betrayal, after becoming someone I barely recognized, I could still choose a different path forward. Elise squeezed my hands, bringing me back to the present moment. What are you thinking about now? That the best revenge really is living well, I replied, but not in the way I originally thought. How so? It's not about showing others what they missed out on. It's about discovering what you can build when you stop defining yourself by what was done to you. I pulled her close. It's about this, us, our home, our future. That's the real victory. She smiled up at me. Well then, let's start living it. And as the afternoon light filled our empty house with promise, that's exactly what we began to do.